and welcome back to the Book and Life podcast. Today we're going to have a brand new book guest on. Whether they're an author, an editor, a producer, you'll never quite know, so you're in for one hell of a ride. But today I just have to do the adverts and then I'll get us straight into that most important conversation. And as we do every week, I'm going to read The Shadow, which is part of the Time Guardian series, and this is book 4 from Marianne Curley. The battle is over, the war is won. The prophecy complete, but life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan, struggling to cope with tragic loss. At odds with friends in the guard, he finds himself adrift, jumping at shadows and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess Athena's death, Giselle swears revenge, to vilify the Immortals' plan for world domination. But Giselle hadn't planned on love, and that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart, or the strings of a goddess short on praise but high on expectation, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the Guard and the Order battle through the past and into an impossible future, darkness lurks round every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with just one. Is it friend or foe who stands in the shadow? And just a reminder that The Price of Freedom by Rosemary Rowan, is being donated to the Ukraine refugee crisis. And here's the blurb for her book. It's one of her Roman British crime series, which was written under her maiden name. All editions can be found online where all books are sold, even her agents donating her commission. Sorry, I don't have the blurb for that, but that's what she's doing. And now, without further ado, let's get you to the guests. Welcome back to the Book and Life podcast, guys. I promised you a reasonably and excitingly amazing guest, and I have delivered because I have been excited all week for this, and I have driven everybody who works with me mad because I have been talking about this nonstop. So, without further ado, I'm bringing in Danny.
Hi, I have very little to say about myself, but here we are. Hi, everyone. My name is Danny Ramadan. I am a Syrian-Canadian author and an advocate for LGBTQ identifying refugees. I came to Canada in 2014, which around the time the dinosaurs roamed Earth. And
I know, because I was around there
days?
too. Yeah.
I wrote no, I'm not gonna go there. Anyways, and
I get the piss taken out of me because I'm LGBTQ too, and yeah, so most people take the piss out of me because I was one of the first to kind of really come out as bi in Shetland. So,
yeah. That's pretty cool. That's really cool.
In a place where it wasn't very popular.
That's funny. And I'm an author. I write books for a living. I'm honored to be one of the very few authors. Statistically speaking, not every artist out there is capable of making money out of their art, and I'm thankful that I'm one of those folks who does what I love for a living. I published novels before, The Clothesline Swing and The Foghorn Echoes, and I've published children books, the Selma series it's called, which is multiple books about a little Syrian girl called Selma.
I love that, because I'm the same as you. 10 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to become a writer, not quite realizing the journey that it is. So yeah, and then I got lucky. Now I work with wrestlers and writers from all over the world, and it was not the intending start that I ever wanted. I was very much in acting and dancing and loved that world, and then I got together with my husband, and my whole focus shifted, and I had to think, well, what can I do from home?
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up in writing. So, but saying that, you'll understand the balancing of the comedian stuff and the writing
Mm-hmm.
as well. So,
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting for me, to be honest. Like, I've always wanted to be an author. I remember distinctly my father asking me in front of the whole family when I was 12, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I was like, "I want to write books," and everybody laughed at me. So,
mine did the
this is
same.
yeah, this is kind of flipping the bird to everybody who laughed when I was 12, um, because I wanted to be an author. Yeah, and genuinely speaking, I couldn't imagine when I was 12 that I will be an author in a distant country like Canada, and I'll be writing stories in a second language, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, none of us ever really think like that. Especially,
Yeah.
I grew up in Shetland, so we spoke Shetland dialect, so it was completely alien to me to think that there was such a thing as proper English or grammar or any of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I kind of started venturing out, and I also was undiagnosed dyslexic, so it was rough when I got started.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually understand where you're coming from in that regard, because ours is like an old Norse that isn't spoken anymore. And then English is completely different again. So it is hard. It's hard. And I still catch myself saying words or writing words that are from my old language, and my editor going, the hell is that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense to me sometimes, though, to just let go of the expectations of what language you're writing and just write whichever way that works for you. Um, I think honestly, like, what I'm gonna sound so full of myself, but I have a distinct voice, right? My
Yeah.
writing has a very specific artistic voice that I don't think anybody else has. I think a lot of people have fantastic voices. Many of them are better than mine, but I just think that I have my own voice, and the reason why is because I did not lean into writing like I'm expected to write when it comes to English. I just wrote whatever came to mind, and I allowed the
Mhm.
poetry of Arabic to seep into English. And I would take phrases that, because at the end of the day, yes, I'm fluent, I'm speaking to you in the language, right? But there are certain things that I will make a mistake in, and
Yeah, of course.
somehow those things can stand out and be beautiful in their own way. Just a dialect that seeps into my work, right?
I must admit, when I did Immortals, I had to do Shetland and English, and that got really confusing very quickly, because it was like taking the hat off and on. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually my brain was like, well, is the hat on or off? So it took me a while to get it finished, because I was constantly going, like, is it English? Is that Shetland? Mm. So yeah, I kind
Mm-hmm.
of sat on the fence a while. So what is
Yeah.
it like for you doing kind of the comedy stuff as well as being an author? Do you ever find it intersects, or are you able to kind of keep them separate?
The comedy stuff.
Like, will your comedic elements, like your humor and stuff like that, are you able to like
Oh, I see. I
separate all
see.
that?
Um, huh. So I write very difficult and dark matters, right? Like, I write
Yeah.
about immigration and diaspora, and I write about a lot of the internal struggles of somebody who's navigating PTSD, right? But I do think that there's a place for complex narratives when it come to those topics, specifically because somebody who's going through PTSD, for example, one of the many ways that folks soothe themselves is through humor and through levitation. So I genuinely think that there is space for fun and humor to be included in narratives that otherwise can be quite daunting, if you thought about it. Um, I think I laugh to myself when I'm writing sometimes. Sometimes I'll be writing a scene and the scene is very specific. I can think of one scene where my main character is navigating microaggressions. He's a brown person and he is surrounded by white folks, and the white folks are making unintended but quite severe microaggressions. And slowly but surely, the absurdity of the situation seeped into the writing itself, and now I started making jokes inside of the internal narrative of my character, which made sense to me. Yes, it is a difficult situation that he's in, but at the same time, I think the only way for him to navigate that difficult situation was to be humorous about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I must admit, with my own PTSD, I do use gallows humor, very British humor, because it makes sense to me in the regard of, well, I deal with that in that way, and then I can go back to a normal conversation. My best friend is one of these people. She'll say, Crystal, you'll just randomly say something, just completely left wing, totally out of nowhere. None of us know what you're talking about. And you just have a laugh to yourself and you snigger to yourself, and then you come back to the conversation. And that's usually when they notice that I've had one of my episodes. But yeah, that actually makes sense, because for me, I never knew how to cope with it because I had PTSD from when I was a child and up. And I had no understanding of what it was or what was involved in it. And it was only a few years ago I got told that I actually had it. So, but yeah, that makes sense to me now that you've said it that way, that, you know, it's not just a quirk in my personality, it's probably just my coping mechanisms.
It is. And there's honestly, coping mechanisms exist for a reason. And we tend to justify, actually, I'll take that back. We tend to judge our coping mechanisms because we tend to, I don't know, run away from intense situations that we don't like, and then after we step away from, like, I don't know, a conversation that veered away from our comfort, we're like, no, but we should be strong enough to stand in that space and handle that conversation. And I disagree with that. I think that if you felt like you need to step away from a conversation, step away from a conversation. If you felt like you are in an intense situation and your coping mechanism is flight, fly away, escape the whole thing. And if your coping mechanism is humor, crack those jokes, have the gallows, the gallows humor, and talk about dead people. It's totally fine. You don't need to judge it or give it this gray terms like cork. Cork is a gray term because it's neither good or bad. It's just a quirk.
Yeah.
And I think that humor and having humor as a way of coping, as a way of coping towards past traumas, is not a quirk. It's an actual part of growth in who you are as a person, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's for me, because I went back to help out children in Shetland for a while. And I thought, you know, I must be isolated, like in what I experienced. I grew up in a hospital, so I grew up with lots of sick kids around me all the time. And I actually noticed a lot of these kids had severe anxiety. And I was recognizing it when nobody else was. And I was like, holy crap. So one of the things I did when I was up there was I would take aside a lot of the youth leaders, and I'd be like, that kid's dealing with something big.
Yeah.
That's why they're saying these things. That's why they're doing these things. Pay attention, you know. And they were so glad that I'd been, even though I was only back for the pandemic, but they were glad that I was there because that was something they never thought of. And I felt like it was like the final step that I needed to take to be like, okay, I understand that I've got it, but now I can like lay the groundwork for other people to recognize it and for others to get help that would otherwise just have fallen through the cracks.
And I mean, it takes one to know one, right? Like it's trauma leaves a mark that folks can see, and a lot of times folks who did not experience it have this like privilege of sorts where they can
Yeah,
call traumatic responses quirks, or even saying somebody's acting out or something. But
yeah,
those terms are negative, they're not gray. While in reality, somebody like me or somebody like you, from the sounds of it, can actually tell when someone is not acting out but navigating something deeper than what we
yeah,
see on the surface, right? Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's great. And looking back, I wish somebody had maybe pulled me aside a little earlier and said, "Hey, you do know you're dealing with this, right?"
Hmm.
Because then I might have actually gone and dealt with it rather than just thinking this is like part of my nuts personality, where every so often I just have these little bursts of like stupidity and do say things I shouldn't say. Um, you know, and I was lucky because I was literally sitting in a church one day, and my friend was a pastor, and he was walking down the aisle, and he just turned and looked at me, and he went, "I know exactly what's going on with you." And he sat down and he said, "You've got PTSD," and he only knew because he'd served. So
Hmm.
because he'd served, he understood it, and I stopped thinking I was losing my mind after that. Just having him reach out
Hmm.
and say, "You're not insane. It's okay. It's okay." And I was
Hmm.
like, hmm.
Yeah.
It's amazing how but society can make you think that you're nuts when you're actually dealing with stuff.
It's yeah, I guess there is a certain expectation, and like it changes between cultures, right? But
Yeah,
there's a certain expectation of what a Syrian is, or what a British person is, or what a
yeah,
Canadian is, and um, and somehow you have to walk that track and never veer away from it. And it's, I don't know, it's a boring track.
it is.
And I don't wish for PTSD upon anyone.
No,
I wish that my PTSD never existed. I wish that the trauma that caused my post-traumatic stress has never existed. But genuinely speaking, like now, years into therapy, years into navigating my own experiences, it opened my mind quite a lot. It allowed me an access to something that I did not expect to have access to.
yeah.
Um, and it somehow made me able to connect with others in a way that I don't think I would have otherwise. And that sounds like bullshit, to be honest. Like the whole thing sounds like bullshit. Me talking about the half full side of the glass when it comes to PTSD. But genuinely
I would say the
speaking,
same thing, to be honest with you. That would be how I would address it as well, because I think we've all gotten so pushed into you have to be this way and walk this way and
mhm,
talk this
mhm,
way, and that some of that is social media and media in general. But
mhm,
for those of us who are like, fuck no, I wanna jump around like a fairy, or I wanna wear pink hair, or I want to get every part of myself tattooed because that's what
mhm,
makes me feel good. That
mhm.
to me is personality. I love those people, and I gravitate. I'm one of these awful people that goes into a bar and I gravitate to the weirdest people in the corner
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's just who I am. My
yeah.
husband will go, "Where's she gone?" "Oh wait, she's over there."
She's over there,
Because
weirdo.
that's just who I am.
Yes.
That's usually what he says. Yeah, he's like, the weirdest people in the room, I'm guaranteed Crystal will find them. Because I'm not the
That's,
kind of person that can get in a lift and not just talk to some random stranger. And he'll look at me like,
yeah.
"Are you seriously
I mean,
having a
you're
conversation?"
you're definitely more extroverted than I am. That's for sure. I do not like
Yeah,
talking to strangers. I find it's really funny because like when I'm on a stage and I have command of the space, I can sit there and I talk and I'm comfortable sharing. It's the minute that it steps away from the stage and now I'm
yeah,
doing 101 or like in a small group of gathering. That's when I don't know, specifically with the personality that I have, with the story that I have, people tend to ask stupid questions. I do not like that.
I
So,
get those
so
stupid questions as well. So yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I just, I do not talk to strangers in the lift. That's for sure.
for me particularly, I kind of, my mother feared that I'd be an introvert and that I would hide away because my brother wasn't very social. So she went overboard with me. So I got pushed into drama clubs and writing clubs and dance clubs and anything that had the word club in it. You're guaranteed I got pushed to it. And so I learned very quickly, because in Shetland they're xenophobic. So everybody's got their own corner and you just, navigate. And I never kind of understood it. So I kind of went from place to place and I got myself in a lot of trouble with the locals because, I wasn't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But it forced me to be out of myself. And it's the same for me. Like, if I'm on a stage, I can be the funniest, loudest, sometimes crudest person. But the second that I step off and I'm Crystal the person, I am more anxious. And when I get anxious, the one thing I've discovered that is a good coping mechanism is just to talk to people about really random stuff. Because if they laugh, you end up laughing, and it kind of spreads that joy and that happiness. And that feeling becomes very addictive. So I think that's kind of where I went in that direction, because I suddenly realized, oh, I just made somebody smile that wouldn't have normally smiled today. And that kind of then makes me feel good.
Yeah, and it's interesting that way. It's interesting because you
I went a bit crazy.
Have a certain...
I went the other way to what most people should.
No, it's the expectations, right? Like, we are expected to have a certain identity and a certain presence as authors. I'm expected that if I want to be taken seriously, I have to sit on the stage wearing a suit, but like one or two buttons open, and speak in multi-syllable words and never make a joke. Or make an intellectual joke, like a funny haha joke, not a funny rolling on the floor hilariously joke.
Exactly. Yep. I get the same lecture. Yep.
Exactly, and you cannot be crude, even though it's actually fun to be crude on a stage. You throw people off, right? Or else you're not going to be taken seriously as an author. And I like doing that. I like not to be taken seriously as an author. I want to be taken seriously as a writer, but when I'm on a stage, I'm just being myself. It's just I'm being this like complex character. I'm not putting a personality on, right? And I had an event where I was the moderator. I wasn't one of the authors. I was asked to moderate two other authors, both of them authors of color. And the topic was about, both of them actually are Black authors, and the topic was about racism in Canada and racism in the US. And the topic is very heavy, and both books are very heavy books, very heavy reads. And the audience was roaring in laughter. Like I navigated the topics, and I asked hard questions, but at the same time, you have to break the tension, or else you are going to be you're going to leave the audience feeling despair after. And yes, the situation is despair inducing when you're talking about racism in North America, but at the same time, like, how would the message be delivered if the message is always negative? If I always tell you that the world is about to burn down, your chances of actually acting up are much lower. So yeah, I made a couple jokes, and the authors laughed, and I laughed, and then the authors started making jokes and all of that. The festival was not very happy with me. The festival thought that I did not take this situation seriously, but I think me and the authors had a fantastic time.
That's all that matters. Like, that's what I say whenever I have to do one of those panels. I warn the authors ahead of time, because I write adult female romances.
Yeah.
And my Pacific market is very niche. And it can be kind of serious because it's wrestlers and it's, there's a whole attitude with that. But anytime I bring very serious women together to talk about what's appropriate sex and what's not appropriate sex, they can get a bit catty with each other. So I warn them ahead of time, and I'm like, we're going to have fun, we're going to laugh, I'm going to say probably the most inappropriate jokes going, and
yeah,
just roll with it. And most of them say, we prefer when Crystal does it because then I don't want to throw my drink at someone, or I don't want to storm off stage, or there's not that hostility that normally kind of comes with some of these events.
I
And when I
agree.
learned that, I was like, well, I'm not normally a fan of being a moderator, but on this occasion with the adults that I had there, I was like, yeah, we'll see how it flies. And
Yeah.
same thing happened to me. Festival came over and were like, we don't think that was a very serious talk on erotica. I'm like, you're talking about dildos and penises. How are you supposed to have a serious conversation about dildos and penises?
That is fair. That is fair. That is
Yeah.
fair. Yes, I completely agree.
So that was the end of that argument.
Well, I was never invited again to be a moderator at that festival, so that tells you something. But at the same time, honestly, I had a good time, and
Yeah, that's the
if
main
it's
thing.
going to be, yeah, yeah, and I stayed true to who I am and what I wanted to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I say to like every writer who comes and asks me, well, how do you
Hmm.
feel about being an author and a screenwriter? Because I get that question a lot, and I'm like, well, one, they're two different things, and I have two different lifestyles for each one. I said, but I follow whatever I'm feeling in that regard. So if I want to write screenplays, I will just tell my publisher, I'll be gone for a month. I'll see you when I'm finished it. And they're usually okay with that because I usually have given them a stack of stuff beforehand. And
Hmm.
it's the same if I say to my co-writer, look, I need a few weeks to finish a book. He's usually very good at kind of laughing at me, poking fun at me on his podcast usually, and saying, hey, that's cool. See you in a couple of weeks. So I'm finding that rhythm now, that balance of trying to be just true to me and not worry about the pressures of work and arts and
Hmm.
forms of arts and all this kind of stuff. So what would be your
Hmm.
best advice for writers who are like trying to find where they feel like they should fit in our industry?
Hmm. Huh. Well,
I do
the
ask the tough
industry,
questions, yeah.
it is a tough question, but I'll tell you what, the industry doesn't know what it wants,
No.
honestly. Genuinely speaking, the writing industry, the publishers, the editors, they don't actually know exactly what they want. They are driven by numbers and by marketing,
Yep.
and they are you get one book that breaks through and it's, I don't know, a fantastical memoir, and suddenly all they want is fantastical memoirs. You
Yep.
get one book that has elements of Greek mythology in it, and suddenly every single author is asked to write Greek mythology. The
Yep.
industry is shifting, and it's fluid, and it really is about numbers and about sales, and it's rarely about the art itself. I've that is not to say that our editors are not amazing. My personal editor, the guy I work with at Penguin, is fantastic. My editor at the children's book publishing house, Anik Press, she's amazing, and both of them are looking into my artistic work. But at the end of the day, for other folks who are trying to break in, I don't think it is fair to tell them what you need to look into right now is, I don't know, wrestlers romance. That is not
Yep.
how the industry actually works. So it's funny because today somebody quoted that back to me. I said once that when I sit down to write, I mainly write for myself. I try to make
Mm-hmm.
myself laugh.
That's
I
true.
try to make myself happy. I try to be writing a story that I would read myself and find inciting, right? insightful. Sorry. And there's no other way, genuinely speaking. You just
Yeah.
have to write it the way it is. Like, you just have to write it for yourself, and you just have to write something that you are proud to read and that you enjoy yourself. And then if others joined in and liked them, then you're good to go. But trying to write to the whims of the industry is a
It's
fruitless.
like fighting the ocean. Yeah. That's what I always say.
Exactly,
Fighting
right?
the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's another thing I always say to people, because I'm in third year university. I'm 34 years old, which is crazy that I'm even there. But I'm
How old are
in
you?
that writing 34.
How old are you again? 24? Oh my God, you're
Yeah,
youngling. I'm 40. Gosh,
I know.
youngling.
I've lived enough life for a 40-year-old, but yeah, I'm 34. As my mother would say, there's a reason she has no color left in her hair, and my dad is bald.
The grief you caused.
Scary but true. Scary but true. And so when I went to uni, they were like, you've got to do creative writing. And I hated it because everything they teach them in the course is nothing like our industry at all. They are not preparing them at all. They are leading them as far away from it as humanly possible. And I'm thinking, this is dreadful. Like, what are you doing? And I even said that to the lecturers. I'm like, this is setting people up to fail. And he's like, I know, but this is the curriculum. And I was like, that's nuts. So when I started this because of that course, because I was like, all the students on the course knew I was a published author, knew I came from a family where poetry was acceptable, not fiction. And it was kind of the running gag, really, that, oh, she's going to be a poet or whatever. And when I went into fiction, of course, my whole family revolted at the idea of me having anything to do with wrestling. Not knowing that I'm actually the one that can make every single wrestler in the room bright red in under 2.5 seconds. Not something my dad's proud of. Has learned now and is not proud of. But yeah, I keep saying to all the writers that come up to me and ask me and show up at events and stuff, I'm like, stop listening to teachers, stop listening to the noise, try and find what you want to write. Find who you are first. Before you try agents or editors or anything like that, find your voice first. Because there's nothing worse than getting stuck in a cookie mold that isn't you, that's just going to make you miserable. And that's been my best advice so far.
I completely agree. And that's the thing. I teach creative writing as well. And one of the very first things that I tell my students when I teach creative writing is that I cannot teach you how to write your story. There is no way for me. I can tell you how I write my stories, how I do my work, which results in me writing my stories, and I can tell you the basics, the instrumentals in writing a story. I can talk to you about plot, 3-act plots, and I can talk to you about dialogue and 3-layered dialogues, and I can give you tips on, I don't know, metaphors and similes, and we can talk about those things and give you an idea about those things. But at the end of the day, I will never be able to tell you how to write your own story, because at the end of the day, it is your own story. So, so a big part of my teaching method is to try and get the students themselves to have faith and confidence in their own storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was what I discovered too, was our lecturers were so different in the course. Like my one was very much like, I don't care if you're dyslexic, I don't care any of that stuff. Just give me characters, give me story. And then if another lecturer was, marking your work, they'd have a totally different outlook. And sometimes you kind of felt like, well, what's the message here? Because everyone's saying a different thing. But I was just very lucky, because if I hadn't done the publishing stuff, I would never survive the course. I don't know how half of them passed. But I think the ones of us that were passionate about it, and we all do have really ingrained stories we need to tell. We were the ones that were surviving because we were the ones that were like, well, sod this, I'm going to write anyway. Kind of, let's just keep going. It doesn't matter if I'm getting really bad marks. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's what I always say to everybody. Persistence is like 90% of this industry, I think, half the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have persistency, you just fall flat on your face.
Absolutely.
So what's your moment, your aha, I can't believe that this has happened, I've made it in my mind as a writer? What was your moment?
Do we actually get those? Like, do we actually feel that way?
I've had it. Yeah.
Okay, so the challenge with the moment, with the idea of the moment, is that it feels like it's permanent, which is not. A
No,
lot
it's
of
not.
times, exactly, like when I signed my contract with Penguin for multiple books, that felt like I've made it. I'm an author. When I published my first novel here in Canada and it ended up winning a couple of awards, I was like, I made it. I'm an author. When I won the Lambda is my highest achievement. I'm very happy about winning the
Yeah.
Lambda, and it means the world to me because I've always wanted to win a Lambda. Like I heard about the Lambda back in Syria when I was 16, and I always wanted to win it. And then now, at the age of 39, I won a Lambda, and it's just mind blowing to me. Like that is. I can't do math, but that's like 600 years later, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, around 600, 622, I think. The problem with those moments is that they're temporary.
Yeah.
As a writer, I find myself quite a lot navigating the days where I'm like, well, nobody is interested in this next project, and my agent is trying to sell this book in the US, and nobody's picking up, and I want to write this novel, but that is going to take 2 years, and I don't know even if anybody will buy it after I publish it, after I finish writing it, so it might be a fruitless 2 years. So there are moments of doubt, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like, yeah, sure, I can be, I don't know, all holistic right now and be like, yeah, you have to accept both the good thing and the bad thing, and you have to like accept the complex story of the ups and downs. But when you are down, you're down. You
Yep.
are in the gutter. You are broken, right? But when you're up, you're up. You're up there. The day that I won the Lambda, I cried. And then I went home and I cried some more. And then I woke up the next morning and I cried one more time. When you're up, you're up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My first moment was when I got told that I was going to go write my first ever wrestling show. This was before I'd really become an author at all. And that was the dream. I was like, okay, if I write one wrestling show, I'm good. I've done it. And then I get a call saying, do you want to give me your books? And I went through the indie scene. And I've just signed a contract that I'm releasing one book a month for the next 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
How are you write one book a month for the next 3 years?
I have a stack. That's the only way I can do it. I have a stack.
I am prepared. I have done my homework.
I was like, I knew this is coming. There's the stack. You gotta be though. As a writer, you're constantly writing something. So I just kept the stack to one side, and I'm like, well, I'll deal with that another day. You know, I'll publish that eventually. And luckily I did that because now I can sit on my laurels and be like, well, I've got, enough books for 3 years. I'll edit when they send it to me kind of thing. And then back 3 months ago, I got a phone call saying, I want to make your book a movie.
Oh, wow.
And I went, I did swear. I'll admit, I swore. It was like, no, you're pulling the piss. Like, no, seriously, Crystal, we want to, but you've got to script write it with
Yeah.
somebody that is in the wrestling business. You could pick who it is. You could pick your friends or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been my next moment. So I think once it's in production, that'll be the next moment. Like, I always keep trying to find that next ledge, so to speak. Even if I fall down flat on my face, I still get up and I still see, well, where's the next bit that I can go to? And my husband's like, I've never met anybody with drive the way that you've got it. And it drives him mad because I will be so down when I fail to the point where he's like, stop moaning, get on with it. And then when I'm on my highs, he can't stand me because I'm like this hyperactive kid running around the house going, woohoo, I got it. And he's just like, day number 2.
Yes.
But that's this thing about living with writers is that we're either super happy or we're super sad.
Right.
There's no happy medium.
There is no.
So what's your goal striding forward? Have you got anything that you're in mind where you're like, I want to aim for that next?
I want to win the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Wow.
Which, well, it's a stupid thing to say.
Never say never. Never say never.
You know what? I'm 40. I have 40 more years of writing. You don't know.
Exactly.
40, 50 more years of writing. I want to be 90 and I'm writing crazy, surrealist, cerebral books and people are like, oh, he is so enlightened. I want to win the Nobel Prize twice. And I don't think anybody won the Nobel Prize twice, but I want to do it. I want to be the first to do it. I want to be the first Syrian to win the Nobel Prize. And it's
so I think you can do it. I think you can do it.
I appreciate the call of like the call of confidence. I really do, but I all I'm saying is it is the drive, right? Like it is shooting for the moon and landing amongst the stars, kind of cliche. Which, by the way, if you shot for the moon and landed among the stars, you are going to be in an endless trip with no food, water, because you're not going to land anywhere and you'll probably die. But shoot for the moon.
Very gallows theme there, yep.
Yeah, just like a skeleton orbiting the Earth for the rest of time. Gosh. But yes.
Yeah, I made that one once. I'm like, I don't quite know if I want to hit the moon. I think I'd rather hit the sun. Because it's at least faster. You know, like you go like that compared to like, you know?
Now, can you imagine a kid in Malaysia with a telescope looking at the moon and suddenly all they see is a little human hitting the surface and a cloud just appears. And that is us aiming for the moon.
Yep.
The kid is like, what the hell is the... Anyways, I'm sorry, my brain. Come back. Anyways.
Oh no, mine does this all the time. I have the most analytic co-writer on the planet. And he gets so infuriated with me because my brain will just wander off somewhere and he'll be like, what are we even talking about?
Why are we here now?
You know, and it'll just be, he'll have said a single word or something will have popped in my head and I'll be like, oh my God, this is a really good idea. And he's like, this is nothing to do with what we're doing. So yeah, I really do infuriate him.
Focus. Yeah.
Or usually he says, right, dictation time. Because he can't type, so I have to do the typing.
That's funny. That is funny.
He's figured me out, so yes.
That's yeah. I have to say that like my husband is dealing with a lot at the moment because it's a quiet time for me, right? I'm between books. This is 2023 is my between books year. Which is funny because I have 2 books being released this year. I have 2 children books being released this year. But last year I released The Foghorn Echoes, and next year I'm releasing my memoir, Crooked Teeth. So this is my in-between year, which is usually quiet. So I don't get invitations to
Yeah.
festivals. There's no massive list of things that I have to do. The children books were written last year, really, so it's not like I have to do anything about them. And you don't tour with children's books. Very, very few folks tour with children's books. So
Yeah.
I am in this place where I'm sitting at home, twiddling my fingers, being like, what am I doing nowadays? What is my next big thing? And
And your
feeling
husband's
like,
ready to string you up. Yep.
and my husband, the poor thing, I keep being like, I feel like I don't have anything to do, and I'm going to die poor, and nobody is going to know my name. And my husband's like, okay, so every between year you say this, like literally, like
Yep.
clockwise. Can you please? And I'll be like, no, this is new. These fears are true. And he's like, can you please, Danny? Can you chill? Yeah,
Mine says
yeah.
the exact same things to me.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm definitely, honestly, I'm not a dramatic person with
Mm-hmm.
most people. I'm very dramatic with my husband. I'm the drama
Yep.
queen in a
Same.
relationship.
I'm same. Honestly,
Gosh,
the amount of times my husband says, "You don't need to act. You're a drama queen already." Like it's just insane that he says it as often as he does. He
it
reckons
is.
I'm a bigger drama queen than 90% of the wrestlers that exist on this planet. Like, he's like, if you were to do who's the biggest queen in the room, it would definitely be you, Crystal. Every time.
Oh, that is endearing that he knows that about you. Actually, it's very endearing that he knows that
Yeah.
about you.
We've been together 15 years, and
That's
everybody
nice.
thinks it's hilarious that we've been together as long as we have. We met online. We talked for 3 months. He came to Shetland. We dated less than 7 days, where he literally met my entire family, the whole island, the whole thing in like 24 hours. And he asked me to move in at the end of the 7 days, and we've never been apart since.
That's so
And
sweet.
that's our story. And we drive each other absolutely crazy every single day.
Oh,
So
that's so,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's hilarious because I can safely say there's very few people on this planet who could live or deal with me for 24 hours straight every single day and not kill me, including my parents.
I think my husband puts up with a lot with me too. I think honestly, and I put up with a lot with him too because God knows
Yeah.
he also has his own quirks and he has his own moments, right? But I think, and my favorite thing about my husband, genuinely speaking, is that he's not artistic at all. He's not the
Which is
creative between
good,
the two,
yeah.
which is so good. I do not understand how poets can date each other because all I see is poets dating each other for a very specific period of time and then writing seething poetry for years after about how terrible that relationship is. I'm like, why do you do it then?
Yep.
Why do you do it? My husband is very analytical. He's financially driven. He knows his numbers, and he cannot write an essay to save his life. And that makes me happy. That gives me pleasure, and I'm happy with that.
I must admit, because I'm the very creative one in the house, and my husband is very anti-creative. So,
Okay.
yeah. And the amount of times I'll be sitting in the car and he'll go, "What are you doing?" And I'll be like, "I'm trying to figure out a plot line and it's not working." And he'll go, "Do you want to talk about it?" And I'll go, "Yeah." And then I'll run it out, and then he'll be like, "So have you figured it out now?" And I'll be like, "Yeah." By the time I get to the end of the spiel, I've already figured it out. So,
Well, yeah, I cannot do that with my husband. He is extremely ADHD, and me sitting him down to tell him to walk him through a plot requires a lot of attention that he does not have. The poor thing, which is cute, to be honest. Like his brain functions in a very different way than mine, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the great thing about me is I've been learning what my sort of learning issues were. So I got told I have dyslexia, but I have a mild form of ADHD, which I never knew I
Mm-hmm.
had. So I'm one of these
Mm-hmm.
people that can be just sitting and having a conversation with someone, and then something will pop in my head, and I'll jump to like 14 different topics later without context. And the amount of people that will go, "Stop! Where did that come from? Right? Rewind. Give me
Yeah.
context. Okay,
Yeah.
now we can go." You know, like I will literally just see somebody walking by the window, and I'll be like, "I can see her underwear."
Oh my
Just like
God.
that will just come right out, and my friend will be like, "Crystal, shut up."
It's funny. Oh my gosh.
Takes all
Yeah,
kinds.
yeah. I mean, it takes all kinds. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's gotten used to me, or we'll be walking on the main street, and then she'll realize I'm not right beside her, and she'll start looking around, and then she'll see me boogieing like 5 or 6 steps behind her, and she'll just be like, "Did you get bored?" Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, that's funny.
But she's this blazer. She's kind of been my work wife for 17 years, so um, we've been that close, like always seeing each other, always around each other. And it's hilarious because her husband comes in and he goes, "Hi, honeys, I'm home," because
Oh,
he's especially if I'm there because he's like, I get two wives when I'm at home because if she moans
oh,
at him, I moan at him. We just tag team.
oh, that's really funny. That's really funny. Yes.
Yeah, so apparently I'm an interesting person to be around.
I could tell. I could tell that you're a very interesting person to be around. I find myself um, curious about many of the stories that you're telling me. So-
A lot of my friends are because I'm one of what was it? Somebody said this to me recently. They were friends with me all the way through primary school and sort of my young
Oh wow.
years. And then they vanished for a while. They moved. And then we didn't talk for 15 years and I popped back in their lives and they're like, "Crystal, it was like you never missed a single day with me. It was like we were still in primary 7 and you were still doing the same weird crap that you've done since I knew you." And he said, "But you stuck with me. No matter where I went, what I was doing, I always
Mhm.
thought of this tiny little girl with this really, really big voice who just said and did the most randomest things." And I'd stuck with him, even though he'd gone through high school and all the teen years that we all suffer through. He's like, I couldn't stop thinking about that small, annoying kid that I had gone to school with. And I wasn't sure if that was a badge of honor or a curse. So I shall let the listeners decide.
Probably a bit of a column A, a bit of column B, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And it's beautiful to have people who put up with us, right? Like we are quirky, as the great word of the day. Um,
yeah,
we as authors, we have to be, honestly, because we function. I don't know. Like people can, I don't know, people can be engineers and they can go to
mm-hmm.
their work and do their work and then they bring back, I don't know, the structural way of thinking. But that is part of the people's expectations. People expect engineers to be structural in the way that they think, right? So when you meet an
Yeah,
engineer and he is a bit logistical, you understand that. Um, but when you meet an artist and they're a bit out there, we call them out there or eccentric
yeah,
or
quirky.
like quirky, yes, which is all of those gray words that are not meant to be positive and kind of can be understood as negative. So that is,
Yeah.
I think, that is our full circle moment today from this podcast.
And that's the good thing about this show because we do talk about books and we talk about life and we talk about our journeys on this show. And some people come on and it's all very much book, 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 book. But it's good to have people that come on and have a genuine conversation about stuff that's yes, we can crack jokes, and yes, we do have these kind of out there personalities, but that's what gives people that are following us almost permission to be themselves. So if we don't be ourselves, then how are we expecting other people to be? And I think that would probably be the topic for the day. Like, just be you.
That's completely true. I think that's a good
Yeah.
message. Yeah.
Well, you survived the show.
I did, I guess. Yes, I did. You
I always say
survived.
that at the end because everyone gets dead nervous when they come on, and they all fidget and they all like kind of freak out, and then by the time that's finished, they're like, "Yep, exactly. I saw you doing it earlier."
Yeah,
and then
I always
they kind of go, yeah, and then they realize, oh, it's not that bad. Like, this is actually okay. I had fun for like an hour today, and it just settles
Yeah.
everything down. And yeah, I mean, I always say this is the fastest and fun piece of our media you'll ever do. So when your next book comes out, you'll have to come back and tell us how you're getting on.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for hosting me, Crystal. And I
Yeah.
enjoyed the quirkiness of today, let's say.
I aim to make at least the person laugh once, even if I have to
Yes.
get really stupid.
Yes.
So stand by, guys, because we've got some incredible guests coming on next week. And I can't believe that they actually agreed to attend.